Yeah, most people would have heard the first single because that was what not the Doctor Dolittle soundtrack. What was it? The Nutty Professor soundtrack, right? Was
Oh,
what
yeah.
yeah.
Which for which one?
I can't, for whatever reason, I can't remember names of anything right now. It was him and Foxy.
Oh, yeah, that was it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Ain't No.
Yeah, Ain't No.
Yeah, everybody heard that record, but that was on the soundtrack for Nutty Professor. You're right.
Yeah.
You're right.
That's a whole other conversation, but we often forget the importance of these ancillary ways in which we found stuff. It wasn't always the album, right? Like sometimes it was this weird way where you saw this thing and you're like, what's that? Okay, I'll buy in.
Think about all the weird soundtracks we were buying back then.
Amazing. I mean, the show soundtrack, all the movie soundtracks. There are classic. The 90s was, this is always weird because we can look back at in terms of nostalgia, but this is always weird. Like, that the record labels weren't doing it because they were smart. They were doing it because it was a money-making thing.
Yeah, right.
But there were the
movie studios would pay for the videos and pay for a lot of the stuff on there. So it was finesse. But
it's always important to remember that it's not about the capitalistic side of it, right? That's always going to be it's always going to be a component of all this shit until we decide to destroy capitalism. But it is the personnel in those buildings at the time that know that are going to take advantage of that sort of whatever the larger money-making ploy is to make something that is quality cultural product. Right. And like you were saying before about getting more Black execs in the space, I think it's always important to not just make sure that there are more people there that are actually connected to the culture in a real way. I think that the 90s, especially those soundtracks are a testament to like great A&Rs, right. People that understood like, oh, I'm going to watch this and turn this into this whole thing, this cultural conversation, whether it be the Above the Rim soundtrack or something like that.
And artists that were willing to give their best work to these soundtracks.
Yeah, not BS like, record.
A lot of because you knew if like the song was like 17 or 18, number 18 on the soundtrack, that was like a throwaway. But like some artists were giving their best work, when you go back and you look at artists' catalogs, it doesn't tell the full story. So if like you were to look at, and I think I've said this on Twitter before, if you look at Aaliyah's catalog, she has an album in '96 and then doesn't drop another album until 2001. But what that doesn't show, people might say, well, why didn't she drop an album for 5 years during her height? What it doesn't show is that she, like damn near every summer, had a hit on a soundtrack. And she could just drop that and be good. She could drop, Try Again from the Romeo Must, was that on the Romeo Must Die soundtrack? Like that was a smash. Yeah. Are You That Somebody was on the Dr. Dolittle soundtrack. Like, so, a lot of people were getting off on these soundtracks. They weren't even having to put out full albums. They could just get, Regulators or whatever. And that blew Warren G up.